Time now for Scoop, our weekly conversation on international media and the political and economic headwinds confronting the industry. We look at who shapes the narrative, explore journalistic ethics, and ask the journalists the difficult questions with trust in the press at a nadir. It's a critical eye on a critical profession. On November 24th, top Israeli officials made two moves just hours apart that could drastically change the country's media landscape. A bill was backed mandating the privatization of the Public Broadcasting Corporation within 2 years, and the government said it would no longer place ads in Haaretz, the boycott denying Israel's oldest newspaper a vital source of revenue. The decision came after critical coverage of the war and a speech by the paper's publisher, Amos Shokin, in which he referred to Palestinians as, quote, freedom fighters. Here's Al Jazeera's listening post.
There had been conscious attempt from the government for a while to shut down Haaretz. So they were just looking for something like this to happen. And then Shokin said this, and then it just exploded. But Haaretz has been probably the only newspaper that brings testimonies from Gaza, that has reporters that actually talk about what's happening in Gaza and also in the West Bank.
Haaretz, a left-leaning daily paper that is widely respected internationally. Almost 1 year ago, journalist Ido David Cohen wrote a piece called How Israeli Media Became a Wartime Government Propaganda Arm. 10 months later, Cohen wrote a follow-up piece headlined On Israeli TV, Extremism Reigns, and how broadcasters had gone morally bankrupt. Cohen referenced this next clip specifically. On a morning news panel, political journalist Yehuda Schlesinger advocated the rape of Palestinian detainees. Take a listen.
זה מגיע להם, זו נקמה ראויה מאוד, רק חבל שלא עושים את זה בצורה ממוסדת, כחלק מתקנון התעללות בעצירים, כי אז החבר'ה הבאים שיחשבו לעשות לנו 7 באוקטובר יגידו, אתם רואים מה עושים להם בישראל? אל תחשבו על זה בכלל.
Schlesinger was banned from the program and later retracted his comments. Critics say, though, the airwaves saturated with racist and inflammatory content with little to no images of Gaza. Here's Gidon Levy on Democracy Now!
The Israeli average viewer doesn't see Gaza at all. He sees the soldiers, he sees the families of the hostages, he's being told day and night about the Israeli sacrifice, he's being told day and night how brave are the soldiers, and by this they are betraying our first mission to tell the full story.
So how to tell the full story in a dangerously escalating conflict? And we ask, has Israeli media become a casualty of war? For more, we can speak to our guests. Joining us is Dr. Ayala Panvisky, a political media researcher. Hello to you. And Anat Saragusti, head of the press freedom at the Union of Journalists in Israel, and something of a journalistic legend herself. Ayala, I want to begin with you. You're carrying out a study on Israeli media coverage at the moment. What have you found?
Right. So what we've looked into was the media coverage on the most popular TV news outlet in Israel, which is also the most influential one. And we looked at the first months of the war, really the frame of this war, what we thought would be the end of this war, but it didn't turn out this way. But really the first 6 months, and out of over 700 randomly sampled items we analyzed, we saw how little was shown to Israeli audiences coming from within the Gaza Strip. So actually, viewers of France 24 or the BBC or the CNN have probably seen far, far more and got far more information about what's happening in the Gaza Strip than have Israelis who live 1 hour drive away. And this has to do specifically when it comes to the human suffering in Gaza, because you could see destroyed buildings, you could see soldiers fighting, but you wouldn't see and you rarely heard about the civilian casualties and the horrific visuals that were screened around the world again and again, and were not shown in the Israeli media landscape.
Nat, about that, how much of foreign press do Israelis consume?
Into foreign media and see what's going on in Gaza, but they rarely do that. So when watching mainstream television, They don't see, like Ayala said correctly, they don't see, the scale of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. They don't see the casualties. They don't hear Palestinians, civilian Palestinians talking about the atrocities in Gaza. They are completely kind of disconnected from the realities on the ground.
Yeah, this war came at a time when Israeli media was already under pressure.
Right.
Yes.
So one of the reasons, sorry.
Go ahead, Ayala.
I think one of the reasons we are seeing what we're seeing is that the war broke in October after 2 decades of media under attack in Israel. We had governments led by Netanyahu himself, who is famously obsessed with the media, and apart from a public campaign against the media, against journalists portraying them as lefty traitors and operated by foreign agents and all of that, there were actual actions and acts taken over the years, increasingly so, and especially under this far-right government, which is the most far-right government in the history of Israel, where the intention is really to undermine critical voices in the Israeli media and push forward more loyal, comfortable voices for the government. So when the war broke, the Israeli media has already been undermined in many ways. So it got to this conflict in an inferior position in a way.
Yeah, and this is something you've been vocal about. You've talked about the master plan of the Israeli government and a smear campaign as well.
Yes, exactly. What we're witnessing is a very well-crafted master plan to weaken the free press in Israel, and it plays out in a different dimension. One dimension is a set of legislation targeting the public broadcaster and other media outlets. The other dimension is a very organized, sometimes funded smear campaign against individual journalists and against mainstream media outlets. This stems from Prime Minister Netanyahu himself, who often calls the three TV channels Al Jazeera to indicate that they are engaged in treason. They are also targeting individual journalists, and they experience hate speech, incitements, threats through social media, and many times it has implications in the streets. We at the Union of Journalists are collecting all the data of violence against journalists on site, and we see a significant rise in the last few months. So this is something very organized, and the sanctions that they put on Haaretz newspapers is only one tool in their toolbox that they use to kind of silence criticism against the government, and especially Haaretz, because Haaretz is the only publication that covers the war in Gaza and shows also the atrocities from the Palestinian side. So this is something very worrying, the attack on the media, and this started when this government took office 2 years ago. So we are really, really worried because we have seen trends like this taking place in Hungary, in Poland, in India, in Turkey some years ago. So, and of course, they want to control the internet and block access to news sites like they do in China and Russia. They already shut down the offices of Al Jazeera, and they want to extend this legislation and have the ability to shut down any media outlet that, under the euphemism of endangering the security of the state of Israel. So it plays out in in many dimensions, and this is very worrying, and we are all under severe attack.
Right. Ayala, I think there's a misconception about what a journalist's job is. Part of the problem, it seems to me, is that any time that there's pushback against the government or the military, people, academics, journalists are accused of being pro-Hamas, but asking tough questions is a journalist's job.
Yes, 100%. And you can really see how vicious the caricatures against journalists are, showing them as collaborating with Hamas in the tunnels and shooting Israel. This is one of the popular caricatures of Haaretz journalist that was that became viral during the war. It is a misunderstanding of what journalists are supposed to do and what journalists are supposed to show for the sake of Israelis, to begin with. And I think this is a serious confusion and conflation, and you can really see that in this recent attempt to shut down the public broadcast media in Israel, talking about pluralism and diversity as if these are the reasons the government wants to shut down the public broadcaster, when in fact what they are interested in is loyalty. Loyalty to the government, not loyalty to the people. And this is a very different concept than journalism, as you say, because journalism is about showing people what they sometimes don't want to see, but they should, and asking the tough questions that people don't want to hear, but they should be asked. So we've seen too many journalists accepting also these assumptions about what journalism should be in these times, but we also see journalists in the newsrooms, the ones that are most targeted, trying to fight back, and I hope that they will manage to shift this worrying trend of chilling effects.
Right. Real quickly, last question, Anat. Have you seen messages of support from journalists abroad?
Very few, unfortunately, and I do encourage our colleagues in democratic countries and in the West to show some solidarity with us, because we are really fighting for our lives here and for the very fundamental thing of free press. And even if these laws will not pass, as Ayala said correctly, there is already a chilling effect, and some really don't want to go into this minefield and be bombarded and attacked on site. So we really need the solidarity of other colleagues in the world. Thank you.
All right. Well, I want to thank our guests, Ayala Panfievsky and Annette Saragusti. Thank you very much for joining us on Scoop for this edition. And that brings us to our quote of the week, and it comes from Haaretz's deputy editor, Noah Lando, who compared Netanyahu to his, quote, friends, Russia's Putin, Turkey's Erdogan, and Hungary's Orban. She wrote, quote, today's dictators aren't like the dictators of old, the way leaders voted in through free elections, then erode democracy from within until it becomes a hollow procedural democracy of majority rule without minority rights is likely to be quiet but transparent. That's it for this edition of Scoop. Thank you for watching. Please stay tuned to France 24.